Hi, everyone. It's Jen O'Brien here. Thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me? And if you can, please just enter a simple yes in the chat box. Make sure that we are on the same page. Can't bring one yet. During the session, if you could use that chat box for all of your questions, Mark and I have a side conversation where we can where he can pass those questions on to me as we go along. Okay. All right, so I think we're good to go. So again, my name is Jen O'Brien. I'm the Director of Communications for Student Life here at Miami. We are currently in the process of hiring a new person with off-campus responsibilities. So I am doing a bit of filling in for this webinar, and I have to give a little bit of warning too. I'm filling in from home. I have a sick kid at home today, so hopefully we are uninterrupted, but I appreciate you all being flexible with me today as we make this happen. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and thanks to Mark for coordinating the logistics and allowing us to be here today as well. So here is what we are planning to cover. We're going to focus on the process of moving off campus and the experience of living in the city of Oxford. So I imagine I'm probably talking to mostly parents who have rising juniors or seniors, maybe some rising sophomores who are moving off campus for the first time. I do want to make it clear that ultimately students who live off campus have entered into a legal contract with a private party. I'm not an attorney. I can't provide any legal advice, but I can provide some tips and some resources that should be helpful for your student as they transition off campus. So prior to move-in, I'm hoping, again, this is where most of your students fall in the process. We're planning to move in the next few weeks. So we get calls pretty regularly from students or parents who have questions or concerns about a current situation with their off-campus residents. And when we ask at those phone calls, what does your lease say? They either haven't consulted it or haven't seen it. Maybe they've lost their copy of it, have never read it. Basically, the lease is going to answer 90 to 95% of the questions that you and your students have. Most of the property managers, the landlords in Oxford, they have been renting to students for a long time. So they know the kinds of questions that students and parents may have over the length of an agreement. And the leases are typically, they're written to be pretty clear with the language to make sure that the tenants understand their responsibilities and their obligations over the length of the lease. And around this time of year in August, the landlord is also likely to be communicating with your student about the move-in process. So like how to get a key, maybe there's a move-in packet with information and last-minute instructions, that type of thing. So make sure that your student is reading all of that information and saving the communication so they're ready to go when it's time to move in. So students aren't always the best at checking their email over the summer. Make sure that they're doing that with the email address that they used when they signed their lease. So just some common clauses that you might find in some Oxford leases. This is by no means an exhaustive list. So students should check their own leases for additional pieces as they vary quite a bit from lease to lease. In addition to these that you see here, you'll also see some restrictions on tobacco use, maybe grills, snow removal, making sure that students are responsible for removing the snow from their driveways and the sidewalks in front of them. Some have prohibitions on house signs or painting rooms, that type of thing. Basically, make sure that you are checking that lease for those types of addendums. The covenant not to sue and the alternative dispute resolution, just a quick word about those. The covenant not to sue means that the lessee agrees not to sue the landlord or the management company or participate in any type of like class action suit against them. And they require that an alternative dispute resolution be used instead, which is basically if there's a dispute between the landlord and the tenant, it is not resolved through a trial jury, and instead it is like a two-step resolution process involving mediation instead. And that's pretty common in Oxford leases. So I mentioned before, the landlord should be communicating with the students over the summer for move-in instructions. Some will allow early move-in requests, but it will almost always come with a fee, and usually like a fee per day. You should never assume that your student can move in early, or the student shouldn't assume that. They should always verify with the landlord at the date, on the date that they prefer to move in. And they sometimes can be accommodated, but not always, if it's an early move-in date. We get questions sometimes about moving and storage between semesters and that type of thing. So you may already know about one of the resources that we have for moving and storage companies and truck rentals and that type of thing. It's actually Mark Pontius's Parent and Family Programs website. At the URL, they're listed on the screen. They're listed, he's got 11 storage solutions and 3 moving companies. So if you have questions about local resources, that's a great place to check that resources page on the parent's website for moving and storage. So as far as utilities goes, again, check the lease to see what's included. You typically do see apartments including more utilities than houses, but regardless, definitely check the lease, have your student talk to the property manager and find out what's expected as far as who's responsible for turning it on, if it's already going to be turned on, or if they need to take that into their own hands, if they should call and schedule that ahead of time. The City of Oxford website is really helpful if the property manager hasn't given much information about which companies to use or the process of the utilities. One thing students will need to figure out is how to split the cost of utilities among roommates. If they're living with roommates, they can split up the bills themselves. So like one person will take electric, another will have cable, another trash, and then they can settle up each month. There's some value to that because everyone then gets a chance to build their credit up a bit, and it can help your student get like a car or a house or an apartment after Miami. Another option is to put everything in one person's name and everyone pays that person. It's a little simpler, less math is involved, but the pressure is on for that student then. It's a lot of responsibility for one person. Other students will create like a joint bank account and that everyone pays into every month, and then bills come out of that joint account. And then I also just hear of a lot of students using payment apps like Venmo or QuickPay and that type of thing. But something that, you know, every group of roommates needs to figure out what solution will work best for them. Here's a breakdown from a survey that we did in 2016 on the median cost of utilities for off-campus students. So I think actually our 2017 survey, which we don't have the little graphic for, was actually a little bit lower in 2017. It was 80 some odd dollars, but you can see there the percentage of students who reported what utilities were included, just so you know a little bit better on how to budget for the year. So the landlord's insurance that they have on the property does not cover the student's property, what they actually own. It only covers the building itself. So check with your own personal homeowner's insurance policies to see if your student is going to be covered while they're away at college. Some policies do include students off-campus housing while they're at college, others do not. So if your student is not covered, you might want to consider getting some of your own for your student here in Ohio or in Oxford. The renter's insurance will include things like the clothes, the furniture, their electronics, sports stuff, their books, and lots more. And it's very inexpensive. And again, check the lease. Some leases actually require renter's insurance for their students, and they'll have to submit some type of proof that they have renter's insurance on their personal property. All right, so I say here, do a roommate agreement. And if you tell that to your student, you probably will get an eye roll or two, but they really, really should do a roommate agreement. Even if not a formally like signed contract among roommates, they should try to have some general rules from the outset. That goes a long way in helping a group of college students live peacefully together. So there are some awesome roommate examples out there. If you just do a quick Google search, that can prompt your students to at least talk about some of those issues that we see among roommates, the common ones being, cleaning, dirty dishes, eating each other's foods, sometimes noise levels, party hosting, gun ownership even, lengthy guest stays, that type of thing. So having those conversations and setting those expectations before a problem occurs is a lot easier than having to confront that problematic behavior later. Okay, so this is really important, and I say that now especially because now and this summer is when we get all the calls from parents and students from the previous year who aren't getting their entire deposit back. So most important thing you can do is have your student document existing damages on move-in day, like before bringing all the stuff in, going around with a video or just a camera. Really, your cell phone will work fine. Taking detailed images of any existing damage and then emailing it to roommates, emailing it to yourself so you have something time-stamped with documentation. Many property managers will provide like a checklist or a form of sorts for students to turn in that says, there's a nick in this wall or like a ding against this cabinet or the floor has scratches here. But attach pictures to that if you can when you turn it back in to the landlord, and then submit it via email or in person with, timestamp, make sure it's dated to the property manager. If you submit it in person, make sure that you also have a copy for yourself that you can refer back to in 10 months when you have probably forgotten all about it upon move out. So this is how the landlord determines how much money to give back out of the security deposit. And there's definitely some discrepancies between what the tenant believes they are owed and what the landlord owes. I've definitely heard about that in the past few years. So again, document those damages early so that you have that to refer back to and can remember what the situation was when you moved in. Also, like a somewhat related tip, as you are helping your student move in, help them find the location of like the fuse breaker box and the water shutoff in case of an emergency, like a broken pipe. If you aren't there in person, make sure they know how to find this on their own or know to check with their landlord. It's one of those things that if students haven't lived on their own before, they probably don't even know that it exists, especially with the water shutoff. I was a homeowner for several years myself in my late 20s when I learned about the water shutoff, and I learned the hard way. So it would have been nice to know that before the broken pipe that I found out with. So the next section is all about your students' rights and responsibilities as a tenant, and some of the responsibilities of the landlord as well, a little bit specific to Ohio also. So here's a few of the tenant obligations under the Ohio Tenant Landlord Law, which went into effect in 1974. It's been around quite a while. Basically, the tenant has to make sure that they aren't doing anything to compromise the building's safety and security or do major damages, that type of thing. The law also specifies that tenants may not disturb their neighbors' peaceful enjoyment of the premises, and that tenants must allow access to landlords if reasonable notice has been provided. So that's, in the example of a landlord wanting to show a future tenant the unit or the house while the current tenants are there, as long as they provide a 24-hour notice. That's in Ohio typically the standard amount that's considered reasonable in this case. If they're not doing that, then it's something that they would want to, if they're not getting that 24-hour notice, it's something that they would want to address with the landlord first and make sure that they know that it's a problem and then have other options beyond that. As far as landlords, they also have obligations to the tenant. They're responsible for keeping the basic structural elements of the building, so like the roof and the stairs and the walls, intact, and they also have to provide that reasonable notice prior to entering the property. So I mentioned 24 hours. That does not apply when the tenant has requested maintenance or repair or in any case of an emergency. So if the tenant has said there's something broken in the unit or the house, then the landlord is allowed to come in whenever they're able to fix it. So this isn't necessarily about legal obligations, but it can be really helpful in the long run to track all communication that you and, of course, your students have with the property manager. So encourage your students to follow up phone calls or in-person conversations where there's not necessarily a record there. They should follow those up with an email to the property manager verifying that they understand the verbal agreements. So I can think of one example last year of a group of students who were required by their lease to rake leaves in their yard by a certain date in November before Thanksgiving break. So they did that. They raked the leaves, and then they emailed the pictures to the landlord, and they said, you know, hey, we raked our leaves. Does this meet our obligation? The landlord wrote back, but didn't provide like a solid yes or no answer. So the students pressed on it via email, and finally they got a response that the leaf raking was satisfactory via email. Later, when the landlord included a charge, maybe it was an accident and forgot to take it off, for leaf raking in November, the students were able to point that email exchange back out to the landlord, and he removed the charge. So that's just one example. I'm sure there are 100 other examples when students didn't get a written record of a conversation, and then maybe they lost track of the dates that the maintenance was requested, or they misunderstood their responsibilities. So unfortunately, students learn that lesson the hard way in a lot of cases, but having them have a written record of everything will hopefully prevent any of those problems in the long run. So security deposits, this is where those check-in lists and those documented damages come into play. So in Ohio, landlords legally have 30 days after the lease agreement ends to return the security deposit minus any damages or repairs, and they also are required to provide an itemized list of any deductions that occurred. However, we have heard from some landlords that tenants can forget to leave a forwarding address. So it's the tenant's responsibility to provide a forwarding address to the landlord. Otherwise, the landlord can deduct a fee for the time used to track you down, and you won't get the security deposit back on time. So make sure upon move out that you're leaving them a place to find you in the future. So let's talk about safety and security a little bit. Fire safety is obviously a big one, and we hate to even think about this as a possibility, but off-campus fires do happen, and in fact, I think it's about 94% of college-related fires occur in off-campus housing. That's according to a 2015 report by the U.S. Fire Administration. So make sure your student knows 2 ways to get out of every room, or they should identify these for themselves, especially bedrooms. I've heard some parents will purchase like a rope ladder if their student is on the 2nd floor if they need to get out of a window. Fires in the off-campus area can be caused by electrical issues or just being careless with getting rid of trash, and unfortunately, impaired judgment plays a role as well. So that same report that I mentioned from the U.S. Fire Administration found that alcohol is a factor in about 76% of fatal campus fires. So that reason is twofold. Like, one, students under the influence are more likely to partake in risky behaviors that could cause fires, and 2, they respond more slowly or they don't respond at all to the sound of smoke alarms. And so I would say some fires are also just caused by cigarettes that haven't been put out properly, smoldering in a couch over a long period of time. So here in Oxford in 2005, there was an off-campus house fire that killed 3 students. It was 4:30 in the morning. It was caused by a smoldering cigarette in the couch. 10 students were able to escape the fire, and there were 17 ionized smoke detectors in the house. 6 were working, but 5 had been disabled. So since that time, Oxford has passed some pretty robust fire safety standards to include the photoelectric smoke alarms. Those alarms can detect smoldering fires 15 to 50 minutes before an ionized smoke alarm. And the ionized smoke alarms are 30 to 90 seconds faster than the photoelectric at detecting fast flame fires. So Oxford requires that you have both. You have to have a photoelectric smoke detector in every bedroom and outside of each sleeping area, and both types of smoke detectors on every level of the dwelling. So some smoke detectors have the combination 1 and 2. Those photoelectric sensors are much more sensitive than the old kind, but students can get annoyed with them because they go off more often. And we hear all the time about students taking the battery out or putting like a red cup over the smoke detector so it can't detect any smoke. And obviously those are terrible ways to prevent a fire or to prevent the smoke alarm from going off. So make sure they know the importance of keeping the smoke detector charged with the batteries on, not inhibited in any way. Those smoke detectors can save lives, and Oxford has done a really good job. They've gotten a grant over the past 10 years to help all the property managers in Oxford get both kinds of smoke detectors to make sure that that renters in Oxford have all the time that they can to get out in case of a fire. So moving on a bit to theft prevention, I get a weekly media report from the Oxford Police Department just to stay abreast of what's happening in the community, and I'm amazed at how many properties, and especially cars, that are broken into, and it always is because the car doors were not locked or the front doors were not locked. So Oxford is a really safe town. It has very low crime rates, but you still have to have basic common sense and lock doors. And I think students often get away from this because it, feels like the Oxford bubble and everybody is a student and, you're not going to be taken advantage of. But there certainly are those who know that students feel that way, who come in maybe from outside of Oxford to prey on students' comfort level and confidence that nothing will happen to them. So doors should be locked. Every student should have a key to the house so that you're not having to leave the door unlocked to let your roommates in. Like, every roommate should have a key. And car doors, like, obviously keep the car doors locked if they're having a car off campus. Chances are they'll be fine, but there definitely are break-ins that happen. The Oxford Police Department will drive by or they'll walk by any houses that complete a form on their website during long breaks. So the first one would probably be Thanksgiving break when you would want to think about this. The police officers aren't probably going to catch any burglars in the act, although that actually has happened once or twice through the program. Their presence, though, can be a deterrent, and if the house is broken into, they may be able to start with the recovery of items and trying to track down, who might have done this a lot sooner than if you wait until the student returns from break to a house that's been broken into. It's also a good idea, taking basic precautions to hold mail while they're away, especially for winter break since we have such a long break here at Miami. Oxford is a college town, and it's no secret when Miami students are on break, so some people every year try to take advantage of that, and there are break-ins over winter term especially. Totally dark house is a good indication that nobody's home and that it's, good time to break in if you're going to break in. So recommend that your student leave the porch light on over break, and they can actually get a free timer from Miami to have some internal lights turn off and on while they're away. Here's a little bit about that program. We actually, through the Family Fund, through the Office of Parent Family Programs, to thank for a grant that provided these kind of safety timers where you can plug it into any outlet at home and then plug in an appliance into this timer and set it so that it turns on and off at whatever times you want. So it feels like you're not wasting a ton of electricity during the day when it doesn't need to be on, and you can turn things on and off at various times in the evening, which just gives the illusion that someone is there. So conventional wisdom might tell some environmentally friendly students especially to turn the thermostat way low so when you leave for an extended period of time you're not wasting this energy, you're saving the money on your gas bill. But over winter break here in Ohio, the house can get very, very cold and the pipes in the house can freeze. Combine a burst pipe with an empty house, no students checking on it, and those pipes can do some serious damage while they're unattended for days, if not weeks. Many landlords do occasional checks of the houses over break to catch this type of thing, but certainly keep the thermostat at a reasonable temperature so that the pipes are less likely to freeze. Some leases even have a particular temperature designated for breaks, so they'll say like must keep the thermostat at 67 degrees while away for winter term. But so again, have the student check the lease and make sure to follow those instructions if they exist. A few other like random safety tips for breaks. It's obvious, like take valuables home if possible, but students should also make sure to unplug their appliances that won't be needed. Leave the fridge on since it's keeping food from going bad, but unplug the toaster and that type of thing, again, for saving energy and for fire prevention. On to some laws and policy, and we're going to cover some that are specific to Ohio and some that are specific to Oxford, and then policy that's specific to Miami. So this is an Oxford ordinance. The noise is in violation if plainly audible within 25 feet of the property, is not bound by the time of day, so the ordinance is in effect anytime. The Oxford Police Department uses discretion, so mostly you'll see noise tickets being issued when a complaint has been lodged, like somebody's called to complain about being kept up at night or just really loud noise that they can't get around, or if they can hear the noise, if OPD can just hear the noise a couple blocks away while they're on patrol. But it is up to the officer to ticket or not. So that's a big one being a college town. Another rule is that vehicles in Oxford cannot be parked on public streets for more than 72 hours. So this can be a problem if your student does not have off-street parking at their house or their apartment, and they park it on the streets. Maybe they go somewhere fun for spring break or for winter term, they're flying somewhere away and they leave their car parked on the street. If it's on the street for longer than 72 hours, it's definitely at risk for getting a ticket and an eventual boot. There also are several snow routes around campus. In those cases for the snow route, there is no parking on those streets at any level of snow emergency, 1, 2, or 3, or when the snow is just 3 inches or greater. So even if there's not a snow emergency, but we've had 3 inches of snow, students cannot park on a snow route. So I'll show you that in just a second. Here's the snow. I think this is, no, this is not the snow route, but the snow routes will be told to the student by the landlord and property manager, or they should just look on the City of Oxford website to make sure. There's also signs posted. That sign on the previous page of the previous slide is the sign that you'll see all over the street if it's a snow route. There's also just very few areas of town where you need a residential permit to park there, and so those are the streets there in purple on the screen now. They would need to check with the City of Oxford on getting a parking permit to be able to park on the streets there. So for the students who have a car in Oxford and they want to leave it in Oxford on a break longer than 72 hours, they can purchase a temporary permit from the Office of Parking Services. That will allow them to park at our satellite lots at Dittmer, Millette, or Chestnut Fields. Those lots can also be used for snow emergencies. So there is kind of an alternative. They will have somewhere to put their car. So we have some rules about trash as well, probably the same as in any of your towns. The trash has to be in a can with a lid. It's available up to 24, or it has to be up to 24 hours before or after a pickup. It can't be, the trash cans can't be out there for longer than 24 hours before or after. We have raccoons in Oxford like anywhere else, so they like to get into the unsecured trash bags. That can lead to a litter citation or just kind of a lot of trash on the lawn, which doesn't look good for anyone. The Oxford City Code also designates that garbage is supposed to be in a covered container, which are strong, not easily corrodable, rodent-proof, and be smaller than 32 gallons or weigh less than 60 pounds. If your student has a lot of trash, they can always get a waste wheeler which is 3 regular trash cans, and you can rent those really easily from the utility department at the city. That is a good recommendation, in fact, for most students in houses, at least, to make sure that they have waste wheelers or enough trash cans to accommodate the whole house. So it's definitely one of the reasons we hear about litter citations. There's also a rule in Oxford that you can't have furniture that was meant for indoors to be outside, and that includes even on the porch. And then no like makeshift tables anywhere outside, basically. The upholstered couches and whatnot can be a bug problem. You can get bug infestations or a fire hazard with smoldering cigarettes again. And the makeshift tables really gets at beer pong tables, which are not permitted outside, according to city code. Open container is not allowed in Oxford or in the state of Ohio. This happens, this is against the law no matter what age you are. No person is allowed to have an open container of alcohol in public areas or in streets, sidewalks, alleys, parks. And obviously the state law also prohibits the purchase, the consumption, or the furnishing of alcoholic beverages to anyone less than 21 years of age. Students are responsible for picking up all of the litter on their property, regardless of how it got there. They are responsible as tenants for cleaning the yard, the driveway, the sidewalk, the street lawn, outdoor porches, deck areas, basically anywhere that's outside of their house. They're responsible for making sure that it is free and clear of litter or trash, that type of thing. That includes party litter. As soon as it's on the lawn, the law specifically is allowing litter to remain. So as soon as it's there, you are allowing it to remain if it's not picked up. So I often hear students with like this misperception that they have after a party or during a party, they have until 9 a.m. the next day to clean up the litter, and that's just not the case. In fact, many of the litter tickets that I see, they came through at 7 a.m. for the Oxford police shift change, or even at night during or immediately following the party. Sometimes officers will be called out for a noise citation, and they'll see that the yard is also full of litter, so they'll get a litter ticket as well. And it's a $150 administrative ticket for both the noise and the litter citations. So you want to avoid that if you can. A little bit about, this is a Good Neighbor policy. It's a Miami policy, and it's basically a policy to hold off-campus residences accountable for repeat noise and litter citations at their house. It's particularly focused around house parties, but really in general as well. So at Miami, we keep track of the citations that off-campus students get by house. And I say house because those are the units that are mostly getting citations. We don't see a lot of apartments getting citations for noise and litter. But basically, the first time a house gets a citation, we send a letter from Miami explaining this policy, explaining, that Oxford is a community. We have community expectations that they should live toward, and so on. So if the house gets another citation after that letter, we call the residents in for a meeting to chat with a staff member and someone from the city. Often a community member is included as well. And those meetings are not punitive. It's more of a like, let's figure out what's going on, what happened, how you can avoid getting cited in the future. And if the house gets a third citation, they're referred to our Student Conduct Office, the Office of Community Standards. Those citations reset and start back at 1 at the start of every semester. So, to get 3 citations in a semester, it's pretty egregious. And at that point, the students have demonstrated a pattern of behavior. So our hope is that students will start to think more critically about their parties and how they maintain community standards of picking up litter and maintaining a reasonable noise level as members of a neighborhood. Let's talk a little bit about Oxford. So the mile square is basically the original square of the entire city when it was founded in 1810. Miami was founded in 1809, and it was like, hey, we probably need a city here as well, so let's create a city, and it was the city of Oxford, founded right after Miami in 1810. So the city of Oxford is a little bit smaller than actually Miami University. There are 7,000 to 8,000 people who live here year-round. and our population more than doubles for 9 months a year when students are here. So the summers are, as you can imagine, a lot quieter than they will be here later in August when the students start to come back. So this is a page from Miami's View Book, and I really love that quote there at the bottom. All roads don't lead to Oxford. To get here, you have to want to get here. But once you're here, you never want to leave. That was by Philip Shriver, the president of Miami back in the 60s to the 80s, and also the namesake of the Shriver Center on campus. So you already know, if your student has been here for a couple of years, that Oxford is a really charming town. Lots of locally owned restaurants, boutiques, there's coffee shops. We hope while students are here, they'll take advantage of all that Oxford has to offer and also consider it to be home when they're here. Oops, there we go. So according to the 2010 census, there are 1,200 kids aged 14 and younger who live in the city of Oxford. And when I tell that to students, they're always really surprised, like, what? There are kids here? So we try to remind students of that because they often consider themselves in this Oxford bubble. You know, they're surrounded solely by other college students, and you may not remember always that there are families who live here as well. So Uptown is really the downtown area for the entire city, not just Miami, and it's surrounded by student housing on all sides, but families drive through or walk through those student neighborhoods to get to town, where there are churches and the restaurants and the shops and whatnot that, you know, not just students but anybody would want to enjoy. So we try to help students be mindful of that there are kids and families who also live here. My next point is the house signs. So most of the house signs in Oxford, and hopefully you've noticed these in the past, they're very cute, they're clever, maybe kind of funny, a little risque. However, I've seen a few that are like shocking and like inappropriate, and the city only regulates the size and the lighting of those signs. They do not regulate the content of those signs. Miami is a public institution, and we can't regulate free speech off campus. So that being said, if your child has one of those house signs that would not be appropriate for an 8 or 9-year-old to read or to see, you maybe think about having that conversation with them. Maybe they'll take it down and change it, maybe they won't, but they should at least, you know, be mindful of how it can affect local families and how the local families and people who work in Oxford, how they view Miami students as a whole. So Oxford, if you haven't seen already, if you haven't been uptown much, many events and festivals and concerts and farmers markets and all kinds of things that happen here in Oxford. And the best resource for those types of events and to stay up to date with what's going on around town is the Enjoy Oxford website. So they have a really comprehensive calendar page that will include Miami events and community events and any type of event that's basically open to anyone. So, you know, encourage your student to check it out, and definitely if you're in town, you also should check it out to see if you can enjoy the city of Oxford to the fullest. Also, that Enjoy Oxford site has a list of all the off-campus dining options, and there are so many. So lots of local, unique little spots that students won't find elsewhere. It's a really good comprehensive list on that website to maybe, you know, try something new that you haven't tried before. So I also briefly want to mention Walkabout, which is a big program later this month, and we'll have about 100 volunteers. It's students, faculty, staff, and community members. We'll all visit off-campus students with a lot of the information that's included in this presentation, and we'll have brief conversations with students about safety, community expectations. We always give a big bag full of materials and coupons and free stuff, and also provide some Insomnia chocolate chip cookies as a welcome to the neighborhood gesture and a, you know, we care about what happens in Oxford message. So we want students to feel welcome and like they're a part of this community, and that's a really helpful program. Walkabout has been around for 16 years now, so we're really proud of that program. And if your student lives in the Mile Square in a house or a unit or an apartment building that has fewer than 4 units, then they'll probably get a visit from Walkabout volunteers the first day of class. The Chamber of Commerce is another great option for anyone. Anytime you need a recommendation for a local service or a resource, they have a business directory there, and I always point parents and students to the Chamber website when they have questions about various businesses, or, you know, there's a veterinarian and the dry cleaners and religious organizations. That's all listed there on the Chamber of Commerce website. A few other random things to cover. So the off-campus outreach website, which is miamioh.edu/offcampus, and you'll see that again in a few slides, has a site there called has a tab at the top called Housing Search. If you just click on that Housing Search button, it'll take you to the off-campus housing website, where for some reason your student needs to find a sublessor or sublessee, sorry, someone to take over their lease while they're living off campus. That would be a place where they can post that opportunity along with pictures of the place and the description of the unit, something about the roommates and what you're looking for. That's all free for students to post the sublet. So they can post that, and that's where we direct all incoming transfer students, all students who may be coming in mid-year, whose housing opportunities have fallen through themselves. That's where we point all of those incoming folks to take over leases from other students. It's also where landlords and property managers can list their available properties if for some reason you need to find alternative housing or are looking for senior year or anything like that. Parents often ask about a meal plan, and there is one available for off-campus students, and it's nice because it's very, very flexible to the student's needs. It's basically just a declining balance. So you put money on the card, and then you get a small discount as a tax-exempt meal. It also stays with your student until they graduate, so it can be used anywhere on campus, including buffets and a la carte options, but it's more like a debit card instead of the meal swipes that you use at the buffets. I know this seems like a really long time away, but one other thing just to be aware of is ShareFest, which happens during move out. ShareFest is a nonprofit organization that will pick up good condition, unwanted items from the student's house or apartment during move out. So this organization picks up the items with their own trucks and U-Haul vans and that type of thing, and then they reroute the items to local social service agencies and nonprofits to help local families in need. It's a really great program. It's like a win-win-win for the students, so they don't have to worry about moving something that they don't really want anymore. It's really convenient. And then it's a win for the nonprofits who are getting these, you know, in good shape furniture items or other items that they need. And then for the environment, because a lot of those items were previously just being left out for the curb for the trash to be picked up. One new resource that we're offering is an online tenant education program for students through Canvas, which is our learning management system here at Miami. It's like an online workshop. It takes about 30 minutes to go through, and it's geared to students who are either looking for housing off campus, who are where your students are, who are ready to move off campus. And students will learn a lot of the information that was covered here today. So you can find a link on the off-campus website, and definitely encourage your students to enroll. I think it was in the email that was sent to all parents of rising juniors last week from the parent office. And you know, if you're attending this webinar today, you probably have a student with questions as well. So encourage them to sign up. It's really a quick way to get a lot of information. And then there are some incentives too offered from landlords. So it's, you know, a possibility if your student is looking for senior year and they complete the tenant education program, that they could get some type of discount or free swag or whatever the landlord has decided to offer for completing the program. So that is all the information that I had to cover today. I'm happy to take any questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box. And I guess we do have one question, which is how many snow days do we get on average in Oxford? And I'm not sure if you mean like days off in Miami or snow days in general. And I can speak to both. Days off of class when class is canceled, you may already know this from your students. It probably happens 0 to 2 times a year. It's certainly not frequently. And as far as like how many days does it really snow in Oxford, that has varied so widely since the 4 years I've been in Oxford for winters. My first winter in Oxford in 2015, it seemed to snow like every week. But in the past couple of years, I think it's been a lot less. So this year, as far as like how many times students had to move their cars into the temporary lots, it would probably be, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 times. Yeah, I would say probably 4 or 5 times over this past year, and the year before that, maybe not as many. So definitely varies, but I would say, you know, it's not like every day or every week or anything as far as how many times you need to move it into the lot. If there are any other questions, we can take them now. It sounds like no other questions coming in. The slides will be sent out to everyone who signed up along with a recording of the webinar. So in the meantime, if you have any questions that pop up, you know, feel free to reach out to Mark, or the email address that you can ask off-campus questions is very simple, offcampus@miamioh.edu. So we'll make sure that we get you these slides. And again, yes, offcampus@miamioh.edu, no hyphen for between off and campus in that email address. It's just off campus. Mark's typing me things to say, so I'm sorry if it's a little disjointed, but since I'm at home today. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will go ahead and close out today. Any other questions, again, feel free to email. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.